Hello dear students, we are going to continue our special senses in this video. So we are discussing the visual pathway and vision of the special senses. In the previous video, we discussed in depth about what is the visual cortex and what are the areas involved in visual cortex. In this video, we are going to understand one more concept called visual processing. Whatever the visual stimulus is coming to the eye, how these visual stimulus is being processed. For the first year MBBS, I would say that this is not that much of an important topic, but it is an interesting thing to know. You can find some of the intricate details how the vision is getting processed. So let's get into the topic. So visual processing. So the visual processing, if you see this image, initial glance of this image, you will not be able to identify things. But when you take a deeper look of this image, you will be able to depict how the horse is behind the background, and you will be able to find out the horse in the background. So how this processing is happening is, it happens at three different levels. One is called as the lower level of processing, wherein the primary retina is involved as well as the primary visual cortex will be involved. And the intermediate level of processing, wherein the other visual areas are involved. And there is something called higher level of processing. So what the lower level of processing can do is, they will identify the orientation. For example, whether the object is located on the right side of the visual field or left side of it, that orientation can be recognized. And they can also recognize the color, and they will be also able to recognize the contrast. If you see the lower level processing itself, there is a huge amount of information that can be processed by the vision. And they will look at the disparity in between the both the eyes. That will help to understand the depth of the individual, or depth of the, that is called depth perception. So how much deep one object is located, like which is the first object that is located and which is the object that is behind. So that disparity will help, and movement direction. Whereas when you go to the intermediate level of processing, a little bit higher level, it will process the contour integrations, like how those integration of the structure or the contour or the pattern recognition, we can say, that will be done. And the surface properties and shape discrimination, it will help us to identify like what is the different type of shape that is being formed from this image, that will be there. And surface depth, a furthermore enhancement of the depth perception can be there, and surface segmentation and object motion also can be done. And finally, the higher level of processing will help us to identify what is that particular object. And the higher level will have other association cortices also, where it can bring the meaning out of that particular image also. So that is the object recognition. So let's go one by one. So first, coming to the lower level of processing, the lower level of processing is done by the retina, wherein the retina can detect brightness and contrast completely. And this information will be transferred to the next region, that is the lateral geniculate nuclei, wherein the retinal information will be having a relay. And finally, it will be going to the primary visual cortex in the occipital region. It is called as V1, which we have seen in the previous video. And this cortex will help to identify the orientation of lines and binocular disparity. The visual images on the both the retinas might be different, so that will help to differentiate the depth perception. For example, for this eye, the object which is on the right side will be near. For the other eye, it will be at a far distance, like little bit more distance. So that will help us to initiate the depth perception. So we can say that it will help in initial depth perception. So that is one important thing. Then the visual processing in the retina, inside the retina itself, almost three different type of images are formed. First, the receptor images, that is photoreceptors, are formed. And second, it will be falling on the bipolar cells, wherein there is some amount of alteration by the horizontal cells. What these horizontal cells will do, I will discuss in the next slide. Then there are ganglion cells, which also further alters the image with the help of amacrine cells. So there is why we need these alterations or modifications or enhancement is because if, for example, an object is moving in the space, suppose I have this pen and this is moving in the space. So whenever I am looking at this particular object, my background should be suppressed so that this object can look a little bit enhanced. If it is merged with the background, I cannot identify what is this particular object. So that will be done by the help of this horizontal cells. Let's see how it does it. So the receptive field of the retina is the region where the impulses fall. So this term was described by a scientist called Sherrington, wherein he coined the term receptive field. For example, a light ray is coming and it is falling at a particular region in the retina. That region is called as a receptive field. the region of retina which must be illuminated in order to obtain a response in a given fiber is termed as receptive field of that particular fiber. So it's just like a sensitive receptor area or a receptive field. We have it in the retina also. What does this do is, whenever the light falls in, there are different type of segments which will help us to enhance the image. For example, there are a group of centers which are called as on area and off area, that is on center and off surround. So don't get too much into distracted into these details. It is a very simple thing. Suppose let's take first one, the on center and off surround. So on center means whenever the light is falling in the on area, suppose the central part is the on area and light is also falling in this on center. So just this center is nothing but an on center. So light is also falling on the on center. So I will get the impulses. These are the recording of impulses or action potentials. So the light, whenever it is falling on the center, then the light will be perceived. Then in a similar fashion, in this setup, suppose this setup on center is there and off surround. If the light is falling in the off area, then it will not stimulate any of the impulses. Okay. So how does this help us? Suppose a moving object is there, and if this object has to be put inside the on center, so that I can focus on the image, and whatever the light or illumination is coming from the other areas, I should try to restrict it. So that can be done. The vice versa also we have off center, on surround. In this, if the light is falling on the center, these areas will not stimulate anything. So this is also designed for specific purposes. And whenever light is following in the on surround area, then the impulses will be stimulated. So there are multiple different type of regions in the retina which will help us to perform these processes via the help of receptive fields. Some of them will be on center, off surround, some of them will be off center and on surround. So this concept of inhibition of the surrounding area is called as the lateral inhibition. Whenever any visual impulses is falling, so it will be stimulating a certain set of horizontal cells which is carried by the bipolar cells, amacrine cells and ganglion cells. And the surrounding ones will be inhibited by the process called lateral inhibition, which will be done by the horizontal cells. Why do they do it? Because we have to enhance the sharpness of the image. So it will sharpen the edges of the stimulus and improve discrimination between the objects. So like the example I said, if there is a moving object, the surrounding edges of this object should be sharpened so that I can differentiate it from the background or foreground which is near that object. So that is the concept of lateral inhibition. So you don't have to go into the depth of it. Just a brief thing you remember, on center, off surround areas are there and the reverse areas are also there. And next, once it reaches the primary cortex, it will send it to other areas, which is where the intermediate level of processing will happen. And the areas are other visual cortex areas, V2, V3, V4 and medial temporal lobe. Nowadays, this medial temporal lobe is also called V5. What they will do is, they will integrate the features which is given by the primary areas. The intermediate level of processing will integrate the features into contour, the color, then the form and finally the motion. And finally, the higher level of processing does two important things. It will identify what the object is. That is called object identification. So that is one important feature, that is object identification. This is also called as, it is understanding what of the object. So there are ventral pathways which are going to the inferior temporal lobe. These are nothing but the association cortices. These association cortices are involved in this object recognition. And it will also help where, that is the spatial discrimination. Where in space exactly it is present, spatial discrimination. So it will help us to identify the where also. And this is done by the dorsal pathways which will go to the posterior parietal cortices. And already I told you before also, the association cortices in CNS itself we have discussed. The association cortices will help us to identify, not only identify the object, it will help us to integrate with our previous experiences. For example, a same animal can be perceived in a good manner by some people, in a bad way by some people, because it depends on their previous experiences with respect to that particular object. So this is how the visual processing happens at various different levels in the retina, starting from the retina till the higher level of the cortex. I hope it's clear. Thank you for watching the video. If you have any further doubts, kindly drop it in the comment section. I'll be happy to help you. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for more such videos.